This single father walked into court owing $5,000, but when Judge Caprio asked one simple question about his lunch break, the entire courtroom realized this case was not about money anymore. At first, nobody noticed him. That was the painful part. The courtroom was full that morning. People waiting with parking tickets, speeding violations, unpaid fines, missed appearances, suspended registrations. The usual quiet storm of ordinary people carrying extraordinary stress. Some sat with folded arms, some stared at the floor, some whispered to themselves, rehearsing explanations they hoped would sound reasonable when their name was called. And then there was Daniel Mercer, a 38-year-old single father, wearing a faded work jacket with a torn cuff, black shoes polished so carefully they almost looked new, and eyes that carried the kind of exhaustion sleep does not fix. He stood near the back row with both hands wrapped around a folder, not a briefcase, not a lawyer's folder, just a cheap blue folder, bent at the corners, packed with pay stubs, daycare receipts, medical bills, and one official court notice that had been folded and unfolded, so many times the paper looked weak enough to fall apart. Now look closely here, because this is where the story begins to separate itself from every other traffic case in that room. Daniel was not angry. He was not loud. He was not making excuses. He was standing completely still, too still, the way people stand when they are trying not to break in public. And across the courtroom, sitting high above everyone, was Judge Caprio. Calm, composed, watching. Judge Caprio had seen almost everything. People who lied, people who panicked, people who came in defensive before anyone even accused them. But every now and then, someone walked in carrying a silence so heavy it spoke before they did. Daniel's silence was one of those. The clerk shuffled papers, a microphone crackled, then Daniel's name was called. Daniel Mercer. He stepped forward, slowly, not because he was trying to look dramatic, because his body looked like it had been running on fumes for years. The courtroom camera caught him adjusting his jacket before reaching the podium, almost like he was trying to make himself look more respectful, more presentable, more worthy of being heard. And that tiny movement told you everything. This was a man who still cared how he appeared. Even when life had been beating him down from every direction, Judge Caprio looked down at the file. There was a pause, a long one. And in courtroom storytelling, pauses matter. Because sometimes the silence before the judge speaks is where the truth starts crawling out. Judge Caprio glanced at the paper again. "Mr. Mercer," he said gently, "you have several violations here." Daniel nodded once. His voice was quiet, dry like every word cost energy. Judge Caprio continued. "Expired registration, failure to appear, accumulated penalties, late fees, court costs." The clerk added the total. $5,000, and there it was, $5,000. Not a number anymore, a wall, a mountain, a sentence. You could feel the courtroom shift when the amount was spoken out loud. One woman in the second row looked up sharply. A man near the aisle muttered under his breath. Even the officer standing near the side glanced toward Daniel for half a second longer than usual. Because everyone understood something immediately. $5,000 to some people is an inconvenience. To Daniel Mercer, it might as well have been a locked door between him and survival. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly. "Do you understand the charges?" Daniel swallowed. "Yes, sir. Do you dispute them?" Daniel looked down at the folder in his hands. And this is where many people expected the usual answer. Maybe he would say he never got the notice. Maybe he would blame the mail. Maybe he would say the car belonged to someone else. Maybe he would break down and ask for mercy. But Daniel did something different. He looked up and said, "No, Your Honor, I don't dispute them." That one sentence changed the air, because when someone admits responsibility immediately, the room listens differently. Judge Caprio studied him. "You're not contesting anything?" "No, sir." "Then tell me what happened." Daniel opened the folder, but his hands hesitated over the papers. And if you watch body language closely, this was important. He did not hesitate because he was hiding something. He hesitated because he was embarrassed. There is a difference. Manipulators hesitate to calculate. Honest people hesitate when the truth makes them feel small. Daniel took one breath, then another. My registration expired because I couldn't pay it when it was due. Judge Caprio nodded, saying nothing. Daniel continued. Then I got pulled over. I was supposed to appear, but I missed the court date. The judge's eyes narrowed just slightly. Not anger focus. Why did you miss it? Daniel looked down again. My youngest daughter had a fever. Daycare called me. I had to leave work and take her to urgent care. A murmur passed through the courtroom, small human, the kind of murmur that happens when strangers suddenly understand the shape of someone else's life. Judge Caprio looked at the file again. How many children do you have? 2, Your Honor. How old? Daniel's face softened for the first time. That's what children do, even in court, even under pressure, even when a man is standing in front of a judge with $5,000 hanging over his head. Say his children's ages, and the armor cracks. Son is 9, my daughter is 4. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. And you're working? Daniel almost laughed, not because anything was funny, because the question was too small for the answer. Yes, Your Honor. One job? Daniel's eyes lifted. No, sir. The courtroom got quiet again. Judge Caprio looked up. How many? Daniel tightened his grip on the folder. 3. And there it was, the first real crack in the case. 3 jobs. A single father. 2 children. A $5,000 fine. Now the audience watching this later would pause right here, because this is the moment where the story starts feeling less like a legal matter and more like a test of what justice is supposed to mean. Judge Caprio's voice stayed calm. What kind of work do you do? Daniel answered carefully, as if naming each job made the burden more real. I unload trucks from 4 in the morning to 8. Then I drive delivery routes until afternoon. Then 3 nights a week I clean offices. A woman in the back pressed her hand over her mouth, not dramatically, not for attention, just instinct, because sometimes a truth is so heavy that the body reacts before the mind can organize it. Judge Caprio did not interrupt. That was his strategy. And make no mistake, good judges know when to speak, but great judges know when silence becomes a doorway. Daniel kept going. I'm not trying to avoid paying, Your Honor. I just got behind. Once the late fees started, I couldn't catch up. Every time I paid one thing, something else happened. Now listen to that line. Every time I paid one thing, something else happened. That is not just a sentence. That is the psychology of poverty in one breath. It is the feeling of climbing stairs that keep moving downward. It is the trap where responsibility does not save you fast enough. Judge Caprio glanced down again. Do you receive any assistance? Daniel shook his head. No, sir. I tried, but my income looks too high on paper. The irony hit hard. Too much income to qualify for help, not enough income to survive. That contradiction sat in the courtroom like a shadow. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. Where are the children's mother? Daniel's jaw tightened. Not anger, pain. She left 2 years ago. The room went silent, not the normal silence, a deeper one, because everyone felt they had just stepped into private territory. Daniel continued, but his voice lowered. She calls sometimes. She sends something when she can. But mostly it's me. Mostly it's me, 4 words. And suddenly this was not a case about expired registration. This was about a man trying to hold a family together with tired hands. Judge Caprio looked at him for a long moment. Then he asked something nobody expected. Mr. Mercer, when do you eat lunch? At first, Daniel seemed confused. So did the courtroom. The clerk looked up. Someone in the gallery shifted in their seat. Because what kind of question was that? Lunch? In the middle of a $5,000 case? But Judge Caprio did not smile. He did not explain. He just waited. And Daniel, still standing there with that blue folder in his hands, blinked once. Then he answered, I don't really take lunch, Your Honor. A heavy silence dropped across the room. Judge Caprio's face changed, just barely, but enough. His eyes stayed on Daniel. You don't take lunch? Daniel shook his head. No, sir. Why not? Daniel tried to answer quickly, like he wanted to make it sound normal. I use that time to pick up extra delivery orders. Judge Caprio's hand stopped moving on the file. The courtroom felt it. Something had just shifted, because this was no longer about whether Daniel had broken the rules. He admitted it. The question now was darker, more uncomfortable. How much punishment can you place on a man who is already paying for survival with every hour of his body? Judge Caprio leaned closer to the microphone, and his next question made Daniel freeze. Mr. Mercer, when was the last time you sat down and ate a meal with your children? Daniel's lips parted. No answer came out. The entire courtroom waited, and then silence.